And welcome back to the Shield of Faith podcast again.
Yeah, it's been a week since we seen you last time.
Yeah, it just feels like just a couple of seconds ago I seen you.
Just a few minutes there.
Yeah, I don't know where everybody else has been stuck, what kind of time loop they've been stuck in, but I don't know. It feels kind of like something from like X-Men: Days of Future Past or something.
Yeah, we're same day recording here. Don't judge us for it. We don't have a lot of spare time, like we talked about in our last podcast. However, a little break in between the two gave us a little moment to go turn on the propane heater here at the house because it is getting a little cool. And I'm wearing short sleeves. Probably not real smart on my part, but here we are.
You know, we've never been really accused of being the smartest people, but here we are. Yeah. Those of you that are listening to us for some kind of reason. I don't think it's because we're smart. Maybe it's because we're funny or something like that.
Or funny looking.
At the very least, funny looking. So, we were kind of talking about a little bit of that last week about life and everything that's going on. And you just mentioned how it's cooling off. Weather's coming in. We're recording this the week of Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving was yesterday.
I got to eat a lot of good food.
I did too.
Way more than I should have.
I tell you, I went ahead and pulled the trigger and bought myself the very first smoker that I've ever had.
Yeah.
And I went absolutely hog wild. My brother-in-law, Casey, come down. He's kind of smoker. He's had one for a while, so he was showing me all these tips and tricks. We got an old pecan tree in the middle of our front meadow down at Mom and Dad's house. So there was
lots of good flavor.
There's plenty of good flavor of wood there to smoke with, and we just went overboard. We smoked 2 turkeys, 2 hams, 2 blocks of cream cheese, and also some jalapeno cornbread. And let me tell you what, it was mighty fine, and we were sure appreciated of it.
Yeah. So me and the wife and the kiddos, we had kind of started a new tradition. We were looking like we were going to eat Thanksgiving dinner a little bit later than normal. Normally we try to shoot for that 1 o'clock window. Well, the first report was, we won't eat until 2. And I'm like, man, that's such a weird time to eat Thanksgiving dinner. That's kind of like in the middle between meals, And so we were talking about it, and we were like, well, we'll just, we'll have a late big breakfast. That's what we'll do. And so, of course,
I could eat breakfast for every meal of the day.
Right. I could too, especially this kind of breakfast. So we got up that morning and we cooked eggs for everybody. We cooked some French toast and hash browns, just all kinds of stuff there. And my wife is ever the chef. I'm more like I can cook enough to survive, but it may not always taste good. But so she cooked some French toast, and she had made up some icing and some whipped cream stuff. And I'm a big fan of eggnog. Really like eggnog. I like eggnog flavored things. And so she made up an eggnog icing and an eggnog whipped cream for the French toast. And
man, that sounds delicious. That sounds like something straight from IHOP.
Dude, I'm telling you that, and that was the idea. I was like, you know what? If I'm going to eat French toast, I was telling her the night before, I said I kind of like some of the filling or the icing or something.
Yeah, make it holiday thing.
Yeah, and she was like, I bet I can do that. And I was like, ooh, some eggnog would be great. She's like, I can make you some eggnog flavored icing and whipped cream. And I said, that sounds fantastic. And sure enough, I did. We got up this morning, and she said, you want some French toast? I said, that'd be lovely. She said, do you want this ice? How do you want me to put this icing on here? I said, in between every slice. So, I've ate that until I have nearly burst.
Oh, I agree. It was one of the sins I committed over Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Well, so, last podcast episode, we were delving off a little bit into the legalistic side of things and kind of how we're pushing back a little bit against that with some of the new law grace that we talk about every once in a while.
Try to live in the new covenant.
Right. And
learn from the old, live in the new.
And we kind of got to talk a little bit about the sacrificial and ceremonial stuff and kind of the differences we were talking about there and how what we prescribe to now with our churches and with our denominations that we go to and how we have landed in a little bit different place than those around us. And like I said, we talked about some of that. But it's just it doesn't echo well with us. So we're a little more grace centered than anything.
At least we try to be.
Right. And we didn't get much into it. And I have to say, I was going to tell you, I don't think we're too good at following some of these laws just because, well, we're dressed weird.
Yeah, we're
And,
wearing mixed fabrics.
yeah. And that's what kind of law is that?
So those types of laws is what is commonly referred to as civil and judicial laws. So this is all your things that we were kind of talking about in the last episode. That some of them were extremely helpful for the ancient Israelites.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping them from disease and stuff, but not touching dead things, and changing your clothes and staying by yourself when you're sick or have some sort of plague. Um, but there was also some in there that in modern times just seem kind of crazy and off the wall to us.
Yeah.
Because we didn't live in that time period and don't understand it. And what a lot of it has to do with is actually the Israelites making themselves a separate body and people from all of the other bodies of people that surrounded them at the time. That worshipped all of these false gods like Baal and some of those really kind of crazy stuff. A lot of the later on was the pagan type stuff. I think the original stuff that surrounded them, like throughout modern day Iraq and Iran, with all the ziggurats and things of that nature, which are like temples. I believe they call it Zoroastrianism. Is that right?
I think you're spot on.
It's somewhere in that neighborhood. I've studied it some. It's a little weird. And it just makes you feel kind of creepy crawly when you read all of it. But basically, all in all, these were laws and civil and judicial laws that helped separate the God's chosen people, the ancient Israelites, from all of these different people groups and religions that surrounded them at the time.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something we have to be wary of here. You talked about how it gets you, it makes you feel a little creepy, a little weird when you're looking at this stuff, and then you talk about the clothing and how we would be separate from the Jews at that time because we're wearing mixed fabrics, and it was about appearances for them in that respect. It was about separating themselves.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think God was, through Moses, given these civil and judicial laws as kind of a way to where if you've seen an ancient Israelite, a follower of the one true God, in a crowd, you could pick them out.
Yeah,
that right there, that is a follower of the one true God. That is one of God's chosen people.
And that served them well, and in the times leading right after this was written, because they knew who they could trust and who they couldn't at that point. They knew who was of their people and who wasn't of their people.
And they could stay away from the ones who were going to lead them astray.
Right.
Even though it happened quite a bit anyway.
But what happened there was as the years and the centuries went on, they developed this into saying that other people were unclean. They were, that harkens back to that ceremonial law. They were ceremonial unclean, and they were talking about the Gentiles there. And, even the apostles struggled with that. Peter ended up having to see a vision of a sheet coming down with all manners of beasts and fowl of the air and all kinds of stuff coming down on it. And he was hungry. He had been fasting. And the Lord spoke to him and says, "Peter, rise, kill, and eat." And he said, "No, Lord, nothing unclean has ever touched my lips."
Right.
And he said, "Don't you dare call anything unclean that I've made clean."
That's right.
And what he's saying here.
So that's basically where it says in the scripture, where it kind of covers your dietary restrictions and stuff that a lot of people like to point out in Leviticus. And the mixed fabric stuff kind of fits right along in there with that. But that's a very good point with Peter's vision there, and that's really what kind of solidifies our point here on not living in the old covenant.
So if you go, speaking of Peter, if you go to 1 Peter chapter 2, and you look at starting about verse 21, it said, "To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. And when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body and on the cross, so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed.
That's right.
So,
And a good point on that, and kind of discussing like all these old laws. I hate to really point out a group of folks, but a lot of times your atheists, they use a lot of these old Levitical laws to say, well, you're not even a Christian because you don't do all this stuff it says in the Bible. And we're that's what we're trying to cover here is we're living in the new covenant, or at least giving it our best college try. Um, but speaking on that, a lot of some of the other things that are pointed out by atheists is, they say, well, what about these people? And what I'm playing off of here is where it says in there that God is just.
yep,
What about all these, secluded tribes that's never heard of God? And to me, He is a just God,
right.
and it is all up to His judgment. If they've never heard the word, they've never heard the gospel. I think God treats them fairly.
Right. And we have to realize too, when we're talking about God being a just God, that when you say that, God being just, that transcends so many things, especially our understanding what justice is today,
Yeah, sure.
And what we have to realize is there's you go back and you look at Genesis, you look at the original sin, not believing God when he said you'll die, and then eating of the fruit he told you not to eat of. Does that seem like some kind of huge transgression? No. But God is just and he cannot stand the sin. So,
Right, and God's infinite knowledge in the original sin you're talking about there, He was telling them not to eat of that tree of knowledge,
right,
because He knew that it was going to make life so much harder for Adam, Eve, and all of their descendants,
right. And
which includes all of me and him and all of you.
right. And it's not even that he wasn't going to tell them about it eventually. It was, I've not prepared you for it yet.
Right.
And we see that echoed in Scripture so much.
And also throughout our daily lives.
Right.
I mean, just because you don't necessarily know exactly the way God wants you to execute a plan, it doesn't mean that you should just go about it all willy nilly.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. So, I mean, you can see that very much in just exactly how, just take their nakedness, for example. Being naked, especially at that time before they ate the fruit, it wasn't some big crime.
They had no idea.
Yeah, who was around to see them anyways?
Exactly.
Adam and his wife, that was it.
Yeah.
And husbands and wives, you kind of like being naked around each other.
Yeah.
but the point is that like when he came back, he's like, well, we were afraid. We heard you calling because we were naked. We were afraid, and so we hid. And what did God say first? Who told you were naked?
Yeah.
Like, it's not that big a deal, dude. Like,
Yeah.
why are you hiding?
Yeah, God's knowledge is infinite.
Yeah.
That's why He told them not to eat from that, is because it's going to make their life way simpler. And sometimes there's going to be moments in your life where you don't know exactly how to go about a certain situation. Right. But as long as you are sticking to the principles you find in this new covenant, treating it with grace, treating others how you should be treated, you don't have to worry about having to know every single aspect of it and having all this knowledge to know how to attack this situation. You've just got to basically go by the principles of what was taught by Jesus Christ.
Right. So if you look in John chapter 1, you start in verse 16, it said, out of his fullness we have all received grace in the place of grace already given. So the law was already grace. I mean, it was just giving us a framework of how to behave and how to follow so we could stay in that area. And then verse 17, it says, for the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So the law was here, and it's not that anything was wrong with the law. The law was perfect, and that was the problem. The law was perfect, but we're not.
That's right.
And there's no way we could keep it.
Yeah, thanks, Adam and Eve.
Yeah, to what it was. Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much, our wonderful ancestors We appreciate you. But they did afford us the opportunity to have grace and truth come through Jesus.
Absolutely.
And
There's a silver lining.
yeah, and I think that was the whole point. I mean, God writing the law, God putting them in the garden, He knew.
Oh, yeah.
He knew that they weren't going to be able to keep it.
Sure, yeah.
And that's
there's another point. On occasion, I do run across people who are atheists, and I do not shy away from conversation with them. I try to have a nice, cordial conversation with them that is grounded in Scripture. And one of the things that's been brought up in one of my conversations is exactly what you're talking about there. And God knowing something is not the same thing as Him making it happen. Just because you know something is going to happen doesn't mean that you are making it happen. And that's been a point of contention in a different, a couple of conversations. But that's completely chasing squirrels. But I don't know. I'm kind of on the roll here. Keep going, Jesse.
So one thing that was kind of echoing what you're talking about there, and it's not always going to be God's will, 100%. And if you look in Romans chapter 1, it says, in this verse 10, it says, "In my prayers at all times, and how I pray that now at last, by God's will, the way may be opened for me to come to you." And what he's talking about is he wants to go visit the church at Rome again. But how well does that apply to what we're talking about here? We're trying to get to people. We're trying to instruct them in what we're seeing here, and we're trying to help them along their way. You help me, I help you. Iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
Find these new believers, which is the whole point of us even starting this podcast to begin with.
Yeah,
is trying
absolutely.
to expound our platform here and try to get out there and reach people who we wouldn't otherwise reach.
Because there's a lot of stuff out here in the world that muddles up the gospel and really what God's trying to tell us. And basically our whole goal here is try to unmuddle that a little bit and maybe think about a few things that you haven't thought of before.
Right. And if you continued in verse 11 there, Paul says, "I long to see you so that I may impart some spiritual gift to you to make you strong."
There you go.
That's all we're trying to do. We're trying to take what we're reading here and what we're learning from it and how the Spirit has given us utterance. And we're just trying to hopefully put that out there and give you some kind of part of that.
We're just trying to help you strengthen your faith.
Exactly.
And by us doing this and staying in the Word, it helps us strengthen our faith.
Absolutely. I tell you, over the last couple of weeks when we didn't get to record this, I could tell a difference.
I could too.
100%. Like it was, you want to talk about devil being after me.
Oh, 100%. I'll tell you something. This is kind of weird and personal, but I even started having like strange dreams of like physically fighting demons. And I've never had those kind of dreams before. And I was like, I really need to get back in the Word here because there's something that is seriously attacking me.
Yeah, and that's one reason why we're like, we got to record. And my goal, my drive behind that was like, it's been 2 weeks since we released an episode. We got to record. Sounds like yours was, I'm tired of fighting these things in my dreams.
There's some serious stuff that ain't going right here, and I got to figure out how to get back on track.
So, if you looked at some of these civil and judicial laws.
Yeah, back to what we were having a podcast about here.
Yeah, this whole squirrel chase. Hey, this time we gotten better, though, because this squirrel chase, we did keep it within religious context.
We're within the boundary lines.
So, but, these civil and judicial laws, we forget how far they were taking them. Even in the New Testament, they talk about, one of their biggest problems with Christ was he was healing people on the Sabbath.
Right.
Which was civil law.
Working.
Right. It's working. And,
You're not supposed to work on the Sabbath.
Right. And one of his responses was, "Do you not tie up your mule on the Sabbath? You just let him go? You're a hypocrite. Like, what are you talking about here? Because you're taking things way out of context and taking them way too far."
Right.
And that's kind of how they went with these things. They took some of the things that were meant to just keep them at peace and keep them in relationship
with God and making sure they're kind of staying on the right track.
And they made them burdensome.
They did. One of those things, there's a story that specifically talks about it in the Bible, is one of their judicial laws was they had the death penalty for adultery. Which, don't get me wrong, adultery is bad. It starts from lust, and that is one of the most self-defeating sins.
Right.
It eats at your mind, your soul, and it's bad news all the way around. And where Jesus comes in is with the woman that's about to be stoned to death. And Jesse, fill us in on that.
So the woman that's stoned to death there, or that's about to be stoned to death, and there's so much in that goes on. You talk about they bring them before, and they're trying to keep catching in a trap, obviously, and they're sitting there talking to him. It's like this woman was caught in the act of adultery, and Moses says that we should stone her, and he says you're right. It does say that, but tell you what. Let those amongst you who don't have any sin
cast the first
stone. Like if you're saying you're so perfect you don't have any sin, you go ahead and you step up and you throw that sin. And I guarantee you he was waiting, because he was about to school somebody if they did, because he knew all their sins.
Oh yeah, and he knew nobody was going to step up there. That's
right.
That's probably why he said it like that. And of course it worked right there directly in that situation, but it's in the Bible specifically to tell us, don't be so hard on your brothers and sisters.
That goes back to what we talked about last episode with the picking the beam out of your own eye before you pick the speck out of your brother's.
Yeah.
And I tell you, one of the things that I love the most about that little clip of scripture there is after he says that, he stoops down and he writes in the dust. We don't know what he wrote.
No, but I'm so curious. When I get to heaven, I'm going to ask him.
So I have my own little theory about that. And here's what I think. I think he wrote one of two things. Either he looked at all the accusers and he started writing down all the people they had ever lusted after, or he started writing down their sins.
Very possible.
And if they're doing that and you see them one by one, he says one by one they all dropped their stones and left.
Right. So it very well could
As he wrote it down, they're like, oh.
Yeah, I tell you another neat parallel with that. Goes back to what we were talking about last episode with the Bible referencing itself, is the Ten Commandments. Moses said that God wrote them into the stone with his finger.
Right.
And what is dirt is, pretty much ground up stone. And Jesus was also writing that with his finger. So, there's another parallel that shows you that Jesus is God.
Right. And, it's funny how so we talk about this, and we know that in most of these laws, there was a train of thought. It's almost like political parties you see in our system of government today here in the United States. There was trains of thought on what it should be interpreted like. Divorce is one of those. He talks about that consistently. He says, he's talking about, somebody comes to him and asks him about divorce, and he says, Moses allowed you divorce because you had hard hearts. Well, there was two trains of thought on divorce. One allowed you to divorce your wife for pretty much anything.
Right.
And then one only allowed you to divorce her for sexual immorality.
Right.
Which they viewed as breaking the covenant. And Jesus kind of set them straight on that. And he agreed kind of more with one side. But the point of everything he was saying there was, you shouldn't really divorce at all. But the reason that Moses allowed you divorce is because you're stubborn and you got hard hearts.
Yeah, absolutely. And to this day, I think that's still kind of what he's telling you, is that would be the only reason that you should divorce is because of sexual immorality. However, Jesus is challenging you, calling you to show that same kind of forgiveness that he gives you, because I know in me personally, there's been all sorts of things that I've done that I know is wrong, and I know that Christ has forgiven me for it.
Right.
And I owe that same type of grace that I'm given to other people.
Right. And
especially your spouse.
To bounce off of what we just said, and then we talked about this a few episodes ago too, where we were talking about how...
And that right there is the only reason that I would show that any kind of grace, is because that's what Christ tells me. Because every ounce of my being, if I was in that situation, would tell me, kick him to the curb.
Right. And that's what we echoing off of that, where we talked about a few episodes ago, where the marriage relationship is supposed to be a mirror image between the covenant between Christ and the church.
Right.
So us and Christ, we're supposed to share that relationship too. And the engagement part of that and how everything worked there, there's that mirror image there too. Because we were in sin after he bought and paid for us.
You bet.
He had done established that relationship with us, and we were in rebellion against him. And that just goes to show, that that's the way it is. But these people were taken at the time Christ come around. They were taking all these civil and judicial laws, and they were making them to where they were a burden, even to the point where people couldn't afford sacrifices in the temple system. At this point, a lot of the population lived in a city. They didn't grow things,
Right.
but the way they had hiked everything up as far as a temple tax and buying these sacrifices and things like that, which was allowed under the Levitical law.
Right.
But the way they had hiked it up, it became a financial burden.
Yeah.
And that was never the point. The point was not to be a burden. The point was to be in relationship, just like the Sabbath. He was trying to give them a day to take a break.
Right.
Not say, well, you got to follow all these rules and regulations during this day, because now you're not taking a break. You're stressed out about trying to get everything ready so you don't have to do anything that day.
Right.
And that was beyond ridiculous, in my opinion. And that kind of echoes on something that we've talked about before. You said the death penalty for adultery and how that looks and things like that. But if you think about it, what the Pharisees and Sadducees were doing, they were right there with false prophets. Christ even calls them a brood of vipers at one point.
You bet.
And if you look in 1 John chapter 4, it says, "Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world."
Read your Bible and pray on things.
Yes, pray for that discernment. And we've talked about that several times. And it's funny, we read that here now. If you go back,
I will say this. Be careful praying for discernment when you don't really need it right at the moment, or God will give you something that you're going to have to discern.
Yeah, I tease all the time. I was like, I prayed for patience one time, and my life's been stressful ever since. And I think it's just because he's trying to teach me patience. He's not giving me patience. He's teaching it.
It's a learned faith. It's not bestowed upon you.
Yeah, no. It's like Solomon. He prayed for wisdom, and he got it. But then he also decided he wanted to marry like 700 wives.
I don't see how that was very wise.
And I think God was saying, you got to keep this wisdom, bud. It's just that will come for free.
Oh man!
But it's just you look at all this stuff, and you go back and you look at the end of the Gospels, you look at the beginning of Acts, and these false prophets, and even this what we're just talking about here in John, where it's talking about you got to test them. Even the Pharisees and Sadducees were saying stuff about, well, we shouldn't be worried about killing him, because if we kill him and all of his followers stick around, then we know he's from God. But just like all the other ones that we've had to get rid of before, we kill them and their followers fall apart and they're gone.
Right.
And so they were almost prophesying their own demise there.
Yeah, you're right.
Because they killed Christ and his movement exploded. And it was partly because, obviously he resurrected.
Right.
And the rest of them didn't. But a lot of people fail to realize just exactly how many Messianic movements there were at the time.
Also, if you look at all the other religions of the world and their, so-called religious people or, deities, a lot of it tells them that they died. And there's only one where it has been documented more than any other historical figure from that same time period that he was resurrected.
Yeah, so I watched a film, and it's based on a true story, based around actually the story of a guy who ended up writing a book. And the movie was called Case for Christ. And it was talking about how we've got like 10 sources and references for Socrates or some of these other ancient Greek philosophers.
Or even Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great. We've only got just a few sources for them. But we have thousands upon thousands of source material for Jesus Christ.
Original manuscripts.
Yeah, that date within a century
and
of his
other
life.
Things that were cross-referencing Christ.
Yeah.
That had nothing to do with being a Christian.
Which is pretty astounding if you consider not only
Excuse me.
you're good. So not only the amount of materials we have for other people from that time period, or within that few decades of when Christ was alive, but you look at the way that technology and writing spread around the world. Everything had to be copied by hand.
By hand, yeah.
This is the printing press didn't come around until the 1400s,
Right.
And even that was this big honking thing
Yeah.
until it was made
And it
portable.
wasn't just, it wasn't like your copier at the office nowadays.
Right. No, and so it was still painstaking to try and replicate all these works. And so if you find a copy of a manuscript in Spain that dates to 180 A.D.,
Right.
that's pretty dang good.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting to run out of time here, but I really think as we're kind of delving into this topic of things that we can see today that kind of basically gives us evidence for the truth of the Bible.
Yeah.
That might be something we can really dig into on the next podcast.
I think it could be. I think that could be something we could spur into on probably a couple more episodes. But like Garrett said, we are running out of time, so we'll wrap this up here again. So if you enjoy what you're hearing from us, if you like watching us here, I don't know that anybody likes watching us. We're kind of ugly sometimes. Well, I say we're ugly sometimes. We're ugly all the time. I don't know how we tricked our wives into falling for us, but
that's because we're good at talking.
I guess that's what it is. Maybe they're like, if I get with that guy right there, I don't have to talk ever at all.
Do all the talking.
All the talking. Yeah, at least that's what my wife tells me. She says, I knew that if I took you around, I'd never have to speak, so I could just sit there and you could do everything for me. So, but if you like what you're hearing from us, if you enjoy this, if you get anything out of it, make sure, as always, that you follow our social medias, that you give us a like or a comment or subscribe to any of our podcast platforms: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I'm sorry. We're on Instagram and X and Facebook and TikTok. So anywhere you get this stuff, we're there.
Yeah, check us out. Also, if you see us out and about and you listen to one of our podcasts and you want to talk about something, feel free to.
Yeah.
We'll talk about this stuff anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I kind of got to give a little bit of a shout out here to one of our good reenacting buddies. So we usually end up on opposite sides of the battlefield, but he's a big YouTube star.
Yeah, he is.
But I was like, hey, you listen to our podcast? And he's like, well, I listened to the first episode. Have y'all released more? And I said, dude, we've got like 4 episodes out. He's like, I'm behind. I said, I know, you've got to catch up. He said, yeah, I'm going to have to. And that guy is just in case he's watching this. That guy's name is Stephen Dacus.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy.
He's
we
pretty
like
cool guy.
Stephen Dacus.
Yeah. He, I think you killed him with a stick at Honey Springs.
I did. I ran out of ammunition. I found me a good stick.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're still just a bunch of big old boys. And
we like to run out there and play cowboys and Indians like the old days.
And it's hard to beat a good stick.
It is. You find a good stick, you hang on to it.
You gotta hang on to it. But anyway, so we appreciate y'all listening, and we will see y'all next time.
See y'all later. Thanks for listening.